Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is One Piece, East Blue Saga, Romance Dawn Arc, Episode 2, The Great Swordsman Appears, Pirate Hunter, Roronoa Zoro. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what's going to be happening within this episode. Luffy and Koby arrive at a naval-based town so that Koby can join the Navy and Luffy can recruit Zoro as his first crewmate, but find that Navy Captain Axe-Hand Morgan is corrupt and his son is on a bit of a power trip. We'll now get into a bit of a more detailed summary and give our opinions on the episode and each scene as we go. So we pick up where we left off last episode, with Luffy and Koby sailing on a boat in the middle of the ocean. An island comes into view, and Luffy praises Koby for his ability to actually reach their destination, while Koby, somewhat embarrassed, says that it's the bare minimum of skill any sailor needs. While Luffy just laughs. Koby then warns Luffy about Zoro's reputation, how he's a bloodthirsty demon chopping up bounties, and that he's being held prisoner by the Navy for a reason. We then on screen see Zoro entering into a battle pose, and then his eyes are red, and we zoom in on his side profile with his red eyes blaring. Obviously, just a nice slice of life moment where we're sort of setting up what's happening in this episode, the arrival at the town, the potential recruitment of Zoro. And Koby once again reminds us why we don't like him, because he's, again, like, you're not planning to go with Luffy, you're joining the Navy. Let Luffy recruit who Luffy wants to recruit. Stop interfering, stop trying to give your opinion on it, especially when we know that you're a bit of a coward yourself. But remember, we endure because we know he gets better. Luffy and Koby have now arrived at the island, and they're entering Shell's town. As they wander the market, Koby continues trying to dissuade Luffy from recruiting Zoro, while Luffy reminds him that he hasn't decided yet, just wants to see if he's a good guy, while Koby argues that if he was caught, it's because he's a bad guy. Luffy then buys a pair, asking the shopkeeper if Zoro's at the base, and the entire market cringes back in horror. And Koby then tells him that it seems the name of Zoro is a bit of taboo in that town. They then continue walking, and Luffy says that they should check out the base since Koby wants to join the Navy. Koby then says he isn't sure that he's ready yet, commenting that the base is under the control of Captain Axe-Hand Morgan, receiving the same response from the market goers as they did with Zoro's name, with everybody cringing back in horror. Luffy then laughs, calling the town funny, while Koby is left confused why a criminal and a government official are getting the exact same reaction and starts to feel a bit uneasy. First off, I'd like to know, with all the running around that Luffy's been doing, getting stuck in a barrel, going through a whirlpool, having a big fight, and now sailing there, where exactly did he get that coin that he paid the shopkeeper with? Where's his money coming from? How deep are his pockets that with all of that movement and running around, it never fell out? And then, of course, we have the town's universal reactions making for some good physical comedy aspects to the show. Puts a smile on your face. And then we are, of course, getting a little more information as well, letting us know what town we're in. Zoro's is there. Axe-Hand Morgan may be corrupt. A little bit of foreshadowing. Overall, a very nice scene to watch. So now, having walked through town, Luffy and Koby make it to the gates of the Marine base, with Koby beginning to tear up that this is where they're going to part ways. And he doesn't even notice that Luffy's already walked away and started climbing the wall in order to look and see if he can find Zoro. Koby panics, saying Zoro wouldn't be outside, like they'd keep him in a cell or something, but Luffy immediately spots him tied up in the courtyard. Not believing him, Kobe then climbs up beside him and is absolutely shocked that he is there, identifying him based on the clothes that he is wearing. Luffy happily says that Zoro will be able to escape easily if they untie his ropes, leading to some more panicking from Kobe. Not to be stupid, they don't know what would happen if they released him. He could kill them, blah, blah, blah. Blah. Luffy then says not to worry because he's strong. Zoro, who is able to hear them from where he is tied up, tells him to get lost as they are eyesores, which once again scares Kobe, who tells Luffy that there's no way he could survive with Zoro on his crew. Rika, who is a little girl with pigtails, climbs up the ladder next to them and shushes Kobe before looking around and then dropping a rope so that she can climb down and approach Zoro. Zoro, of course, starts to be a little bit worried for her and asks if she's trying to get killed, but she uses her cuteness to tell him that it's her first try at making some onigiri rice balls herself, holding them out to him. He, of course, harshly refuses, trying to make her leave because she's not supposed to be there when his worry, or what he was worried about, is realized as Helmeppo arrives, flanked by his marine guards, which at first relieves Kobe. There's Marines here. Everything will be fine. He was worried for Rika approaching Zoro. Helmeppo then arrives, scolds Zoro for being a bully, before snatching one of the rice balls away from Rika without permission. He eats them, he gets a disgusted look on his face, spits it out. They're sweet, they're supposed to be salty, and he scolds Rika for making them with sugar instead of salt. Rika informs him that she made them with sugar on purpose, thinking that would make them taste better, as she prefers sweet things being a child, though even adults can enjoy sweet things. Helmeppo, of course, is offended and decides to step on the onigiri on the ground, grind them into the dirt, which of course shocks Kobe, who calls the entire scene terrible. Rika, of course, starts crying about all her hard work being destroyed. And then Helmeppo decides to pull out and read a notice that anyone who helps criminals will be executed, signed by Navy Captain Morgan, which of course scares her. And he comments how even little brats know how scary his dad is, happy to see that she's afraid. Helmeppo then orders a marine guard to literally throw, Rika out of the courtyard, threatening to tell his dad if his order isn't followed. The marine reluctantly comes forward, kneels down next to her, apologizes, and tells her to curl into a ball. We then change scenes, so we don't see them actually throwing her, but we do see her flying through the air, and she flies right past Luffy, who acts quickly and manages to catch her, and receiving her thanks when they land, as he protected her by landing first. Then Kobe arrives, check if she's all right, does some mother henning, and in the courtyard, Helmeppo laughs at Zoro for trying so hard to stay alive. Zoro confirms that he's going to stay alive the whole month, while Helmeppo tells him good luck with that, laughing as he starts to walk away with his marine guards. Zoro then reminds him that there's 10 days left, and Helmeppo says that's assuming he can live that long. Some foreshadowing going on. Kobe then asks Luffy how he can be so cruel, referring to Helmeppo, but Luffy's already gone again. Back in the courtyard, Zoro notices Luffy's arrival. Luffy stands a short distance away from him looking at him, and Luffy tells him that he hears he's a bad guy, and that he's stuck out here for all to see, wondering if he's really that strong at all. Zoro tells him to mind his own business. Luffy then approaches, saying if it was him, he'd starve in 3 days before chuckling, and Zoro of course brags that he has more spirit than him, with a smile, swearing to live through this. Luffy smiles back, calling him a strange person, before he turns to leave, and then Zoro calls him back and asks him to feed him some of the smushed rice ball. And of course, Luffy warns him that it's more of a mud ball at this point, but Zoro tells him to just do what he said, and then he eats it when Luffy feeds it to him, and he calls it good. Once again, I'm going to point out that Kobe really needs to mind his own business. He's not staying. So who Luffy wants in his crew, what Luffy wants to do with Zoro, none of his business at this point. And I understand you could kind of twist your brain around to say, oh, he's just showing concern for a friend. But at the same time, again, like he's not sticking around. He's joining the Navy. Luffy is a pirate, even if he is a good one, like a morally good person. So again, Kobe really doesn't have much grounds to stand on. And Zoro, at this point, he's not even a criminal. He is literally a bounty hunter. He's on the side of the Navy nest. Like, so why he's so dangerous. You can't have him on your crew, blah, blah, blah. I don't get it. And obviously, we have our introduction of Helmeppo, who is who's dislikably likable. He's a character that's meant to be disliked, so it's not like accidental in any way that he is dislikable, but just the way that he walks around so confident, and it's like living off his dad's power and then tripping with it. He amuses me, we should say. Although him yelling at Rika, him smushing her hard work when she had made these and they weren't even for him, and he's the one who stole them in the first place. Obviously the implying that she, a child, could be executed, but at least he doesn't execute her. At least he scares her a bit, but then he just tosses her out or has a marine toss her out. Of course, had Luffy not been there and she was thrown out, she probably would have been injured. So he's still trash. He's not a good person at this point, but he shows hints that he could potentially, hint, hint, be redeemable. And again, the power tripping is funny. We're now back in town, sitting in an alley, as Luffy tells Rika that Zoro ate all of the onigiri that was in the dirt, and that makes her incredibly happy. Kobe then wonders if he's as evil as they say, and Rika becomes somewhat offended and defends Zoro passionately, telling them that he let himself be punished in their place, and it's all Morgan's son Helmeppo's fault. We then are treated to a flashback where Helmeppo and his pet Zoro are terrorizing the town. They then enter Ririka's, who is Rika's mother's, restaurant, and he lets Zoro eat off of other people's plates, cause some trouble. Rika, not being a child, not knowing any better, tries to swat him away with what looks like a towel at the end of a stick. But then Ririka scolds her that they're going to get in trouble, so to stop it. Zoro then, of course, turns his attention to Rika and starts to attack her, so Zoro then throws a stool at it, and Helmeppo recognizes Zoro, scolding him for going against the Navy. Zoro then tells him to shut up and let him eat in peace, and Helmeppo threatens him with a sword. But Zoro just swats his sword away, punching him before threatening him with his own sword, calling him and his pet annoying. Helmeppo, despite his fear, threatens him with his dad and makes the deal that if he lets himself be caught for 1 month, he'll let him go and not punish any of the villagers. Zoro, being the type of person that he is, agrees and drops his sword, point first into the restaurant's floor. We then return back to the present, where Rika informs them that it's now been 3 weeks and that Helmeppo has been beating him while he's been tied up, helpless, and she starts to cry. Now, with Helmeppo's pet, he calls it a pet. It looks like a dog. But as I've mentioned with One Piece, sometimes the proportions can be a little distorted and there's just something off about it. And I honestly couldn't tell if it's actually meant to be like a dog, like a domesticated dog, or whether it was supposed to be some sort of more akin to like a wolf or a fox or something like that. Like it was definitely canine in nature, but it was just drawn in a way where I had questions about what exactly this thing was supposed to be. Obviously canine, but I don't necessarily. I mean, it was meant to look scary because it was attacking. Rika probably was just distorted by her mind, but at the same time, it didn't quite look like what you would expect a pet dog to look like. Obviously, again, we have the fact that Helmeppo is dislikable, but unlike Kobe, he's actually supposed to be dislikable. Like, we're not supposed to like him. So that makes his dislikability more forgivable as it's supposed to be there versus Kobe, who we're supposed to probably like at this point and still just annoys us and is just not a likable character. And then, of course, Zoro saving them shows that he has a good nature and he just as easily could have killed Helmeppo, moved on, left the villagers to deal with the fallout, but he didn't. And he's literally chosen to sacrifice himself so that they don't get punished by surviving a month out in the open, letting himself get beaten, letting himself get captured. He's just all around a good guy, and this shows it to us. We are now back with Helmeppo, who's arrived at Ririka's restaurant, demanding that he get service, while Nami sits at a table nearby and observes. Luffy and Kobe walk in and overhear Helmeppo bragging about how he's going to execute Zoro the next day because he's been bored lately. Luffy, of course, becomes incredibly enraged by this, having just heard about the deal that Zoro's made, and now hearing that they're going against it, and he punches him, calling him scum. Helmeppo tries to leverage his father's power, but Luffy says he doesn't care, demanding that he fight him himself. Kobe tries holding Luffy back, once again ineffectually, and Luffy says that he's made up his mind and that Zoro is going to be joining his crew. Now, in episode 1, we also saw where Kobe tried to stop Luffy from going into the food storage, and now he's trying to stop him from attacking Helmeppo. He comes up to like Luffy's hip. He is not strong in any way. He literally has no chance. He still hasn't learned to mind his own business. And once again, he's trying to stop Luffy. Like, what in his brain made him think that he had even the slightest bit of chance to prevent Luffy from doing whatever Luffy wants to do? Luffy is strong. Kobe is not. Kobe, even with his full body weight, is completely ineffective. And once again, he should just mind his own business. He's leaving soon. There's parting ways. He doesn't need to interfere in Luffy's business anymore, or really ever at this point. And then, of course, we get treated to Helmeppo's absolute shock and fear when somebody doesn't actually care who his dad is because he realizes, oh, now I'm in trouble. And the look on his face. And the cowardice that it then reveals, you know, this is the fall after the tripping. Now, after we've been teased for a little bit, we now get our introduction to Captain Axehand Morgan. He is sitting in his office, looking out the window at the town, while musing on his own greatness. The Marine who has come to report to him confirms that in fact he is very great. And Morgan wonders why the tribute from the town has been lacking lately, given that he's so great. The Marine, of course, tells him that the people have limits to their wallets, but Morgan counters, no, that's not the issue. The issue is actually their lack of respect for him. This, of course, is when Helmeppo runs into his office, complaining that there's somebody he wants him to slaughter while holding on to his cheek. Now, I happen to like Morgan's self-confidence. However, his lack of awareness is a bit troubling. I mean, how great could you be if you've lost badly enough in the past to be missing both a hand, which is now replaced with an axe, and your jaw, which is now replaced with a metal jaw? Clearly, you may be great, but you are certainly not the greatest. So this confidence that you have may be a little bit overblown, but the self-confidence is amusing. And obviously, he's got a lot of narcissism and ego going on too. But again, How great! He's there musing on his greatness. The Marines agree he's great. He thinks he's the most amazing thing ever, yet you're missing a hand and you're missing a jaw. So, lack of self-awareness, bit troubling, self-confidence, refreshing. We now once again see Zoro tied up in the courtyard. Zoro is sweating from the sun's heat, which is beating down, and he flashes back to his past, where he fights with Kuna and loses, while she tells him that he's as weak as ever. He then voiceovers images of a sad Kuna that he promised her and can't afford to die in a place like this. He then startles back to the present to find that Luffy is in front of him again, commenting that he has plenty of free time. Luffy says that he's going to untie him, so Zoro should join his pirate crew. Zoro refuses, saying he's not stooping to a criminal's level. Luffy, then a little bit offended himself, asks what's wrong with being a pirate. Zoro then calls all pirates despicable, asking why he'd want to be one. Luffy smiles and says he's already known as an evil bounty hunter. Zoro says that people can say what they want, but he's not done anything that he regrets. With a smile, he then says he'll live through this and do what he wants to. Luffy acknowledges this and acknowledges hearing him, but says that he's already decided that he's going to join his crew. And Zoro says not to decide things on his own, but Luffy completely ignores that, continuing that he hears he uses swords. Zoro confirms that he is a swordsman, but that Helmeppo has taken his swords. Luffy smiles again, saying that he'll get his swords back, and if he wants it, he'll have to join his crew. Zoro yells that he's getting on his nerves. Luffy just laughs, running off, and he wonders if he's going to storm the base alone, but then notices that Luffy's running off in the wrong direction. So he yells out to Luffy, "You're going the wrong way," and Luffy rockets back past him, shocking him into wondering who exactly this is. Obviously, one of the best things about Luffy, and at times it could be a little bit annoying, but for the most part, one of the best things about Luffy is how he just kind of forges his own way ahead and just drags everybody else with him. He makes his choices, he does his thing, and people just kind of end up dragged along in his wake. And this, of course, is the first time that we're really seeing, like, we saw it a little bit with Kobe, but Kobe also wanted to leave, so that wasn't as obvious. Whereas in this case, it's like, Zoro, you're joining my crew. I don't want to join your crew. Well, I've already decided that you're joining my crew. I'm going to get you your swords. But if you want them back, then you have to join my crew. And it's just kind of really funny. And then, of course, Luffy seems like he'd be a really fun person to be around. Only if you were adventurous in nature, though, which obviously all of his crew members are. But obviously, if you were like a bit of an introvert, kind of a cautious person, he'd probably be like the worst person to know. Because, as I mentioned before, he's dragging people along kind of in his wake as he goes around and does his own thing. And if you're not down for the types of things he's doing, having those adventures, having those fights, so on and so forth, oh, that would be a nightmare. But from the safety of our couch watching the show, I absolutely love this nature of Luffy's. I love that he's always smiling, always happy, always going about his own life in his own little bubble, despite the fact that there are all those people around him being impacted while he's just having a grand old time. To raise a giant statue of Captain Morgan while he observes from the sidelines. Helmeppo asks why his dad isn't getting revenge for him being hit in the face, as even Captain Morgan himself hasn't hit him in the face before. Morgan then, just to counter him, hits him and sends him flying over into the wall, like retaining wall around the roof, saying that the only reason he's never hit him is because he wasn't worth hitting, reminding him that it's his father, him, who is great, not Helmeppo. He then brings up Rika sneaking into the courtyard, which he's heard about, and Helmeppo says that he's dealt with it. Morgan asks if he killed her, but Helmeppo is a little bit shocked and says she was just a little kid. Morgan then points to one of the Marines, Ripper, telling him to go into town and kill her. Ripper, of course, is in disbelief as she's just a little girl and doesn't at first think that he's serious. Morgan says, though, doubling down, that those who disrespect his orders disrespect him. Ripper, of course, stands by his morals and says, and who's the lieutenant, says he can't do it. And Morgan knocks him down, saying that he rose to captain with his own strength. And in this world, title means everything. And as the highest ranking at the base, he is the most superior person there. So everything that he does is automatically right. Once the Marines salute, he decides that Rika's execution can wait, and raising the symbol of his authority that took many years to complete is far more important. He then has the Marines return to struggling in order to raise the statue on the roof. Now, this is kind of where we start to feel a little bad for Helmeppo. Yes, he's trash. Yes, he has an attitude problem. Yes, he goes on power trips with other people's power. But he had this, like, feeling of being loved. Like, he thought his parent loved him. He thought his parent would fight for him, his parent would take care of him, and instead, he was just looked down on as trash by his parent, not even worth hitting, not even worth caring about. The only reason he probably ever stood up for Helmeppo at any point was because it would reflect poorly on him as the one that he's associated to. If Helmeppo was being disrespected, then it would be him being disrespected type thing. But it's a sad realization to have, especially when you're an adult, that in fact somebody you thought loved you actually really thinks less than less of you. Now, we understand that he is the highest ranking person at this base, but I feel like there should be some sort of, performance review, higher authority that sometimes comes to like a higher authority that would like come in and do some spot checks. Obviously, like he's abusing his power. So I don't understand how he's still in power. Like any of the Marines during a performance review, if it was anonymous, could probably, call him out. There must be higher authorities in the Marines who could then do some sort of investigation based on that. Even if we take it outside of the Marines, there must have been some visitor to the village who maybe noticed the state of it and maybe when they're passing the next Marine base went, hey, you might want to go and check this one out at Shellstown. There's some stuff going down over there. Or even like a brave soul from the village. This is an island world. They have islands everywhere. Obviously, they're going to have boats. Surely one person from the village would be brave enough. Maybe they grew up. Maybe it's time for them to leave home. Maybe they take the boat. Maybe they sail to one of the nearby islands and another naval base and again report on Morgan's abuse of power. I don't really understand how he's still in power when the village is in this state of being afraid of him, when they're being squeezed dry with taxes or tribute, as he called them. How the Marines are afraid of him. Like, surely there must have been some authority, some review, something that they could have, escalated to prevent this type of corruption. Obviously, then we wouldn't have our plot, so we understand why there isn't. But I also see it in future episodes as well. There's a lot of corruption because our main character is a pirate. Automatically, the Navy, then, which normally would be considered the good guys, there's a lot of corruption going on. Not all of them, but enough of it that you can kind of feel like the roles have the potential to be reversed between pirates and navy and the traditional one's bad, one's good. You can see that being reversed because they show enough of the bad on both sides and the good on both sides for it to not be black and white, but shades of gray. We then return to Luffy, who's wandering around the deserted base and thinking, it's so weird that there's nobody around. How's he going to find the swords if there's nobody to ask? Then back on the roof, the hand of the statue knocks on like the roof of like a little outbuilding that's on the roof, and Morgan looms over the Marine responsible, clearly upset. Luffy, of course, from down below hears the commotion above, and then back above, Morgan says that they were to think of the statue as him, and that any scratch or speck of dirt on it is treachery against him. Back below again, Luffy decides to rocket up to the roof, which he overshoots a bit. And he distracts Morgan from his berating of the Marine by pulling on the ropes that are on the statue in order to stop his momentum, which leads to it kind of falling down. And just because of the way that it falls, kind of the hips landing on the roof railing, it snaps in half. Luffy, of course, apologizes because he's polite. Um, but Morgan doesn't really take it that way and orders him seized so that he can be killed. Helmeppo points to Luffy, saying that that was the one who hit him, which of course brings him to Luffy's notice. Luffy immediately beelines for Helmeppo, saying that he's been looking for him, and then drags him away, saying there's something that he needs to give back. Morgan orders the Marines to go after Luffy, ordering them not to let him escape. And then another Marine happens to glance from the roof and notice Kobe entering the courtyard. And then Morgan gets angry at there being one traitor after another. Meanwhile, within the base, now that everything is getting all chaotic thanks to Luffy, Nami is interrupted on picking a lock by the search for Luffy and is a bit upset by it. But we only see her briefly here. Luffy, obviously, is comedic gold. He's amazing. Everything he does is amusing and funny. And like I said, he's the type of person, he lives in his bubble, he does what he wants to do, and people around him get impacted and dragged along into this way. I also like kind of the, well, this isn't a philosophical show, it's made for children, although adults do enjoy it too. But Morgan literally, not literally, I don't think that's the right word. But anyways, on a philosophical note, you could say that Morgan is watching his authority crumble away as his statue of himself is broken in two. And he does point out that there is one traitor after another, and then we get Kobe interfering again. Did Kobe need to be there? No. Why is he acting on his own? I mean, it does show again that he is trying to grow, trying to become better. And as we are rewatchers and know the future, we also know that he does eventually get better. So I do want to commend Kobe for taking the initiative to try to help Zoro, knowing that that's Luffy's goal. But also, he's trying to join the Navy, so maybe coming to the attention of the Navy as trying to break out one of their prisoners is not the smartest move that he could make. But I do like that he is trying to be a little bit braver, trying to grow as a character. Whether he succeeds or not is still up in the air. We've only briefly seen him running into the courtyard, but at least he's trying. And so we come to Luffy dragging Helmeppo down a hallway, and Helmeppo trying to get his bearings, being dragged, says that he's going to tell Luffy where the swords are if he just stops dragging him. Luffy then stops, and Helmeppo informs him helpfully that they have just passed the door to his room where the swords are. Luffy then scolds him for, "Why didn't you say so? Now we have to go back." And they turn to go back, and some of the other Marines arrive. So he decides to hold Helmeppo up as a shield, telling them to shoot if they dare. They, of course, hesitate. They're not going to shoot Morgan's son. So Luffy then runs through them as Helmeppo basically is having a bit of a panic attack that he's going to be shot. And Kobe, meanwhile, in the courtyard, works on untying Zoro, saying that he can't stand to watch the Navy like this anymore, saying he wants to be an honorable Marine. Zoro tries to stop him from untying the ropes because of his deal, but Kobe then informs him that the Navy plans to break the deal, telling him that he doesn't need to be a pirate, but asks if he can help Luffy, who was the one who punched Helmeppo in anger on his behalf. Morgan then arrives and sentences Kobe and Zoro to death for treachery against him, ordering them executed on the spot. Meanwhile, oh, and of course the Marines line up with their guns, firing range, but they haven't fired yet. Luffy then enters Helmeppo's very pink room that has a flower wreath on the door that says, "My room," and finds three swords in an alcove next to a column on the wall. And he tries to ask Helmeppo which one is Zoro's, but Helmeppo at this point has completely passed out and given up on life. So he decides to bring them all and notices Kobe outside of the window being accosted by these Navy people. Back in the courtyard, we see Kobe is crying while the guns are pointed at him, asking, and Morgan asks if they and Straw Hat were planning a coup. Zoro claims that he fights alone, unlike Morgan, who uses his Marines as cannon fodder cronies. And Morgan says that Zoro may be strong, but before his authority, he's nothing but scum. And the guns are cocked, and Zoro once again flashes back to Kuina and her calling him weak when he loses a fight against her. Meanwhile, once again upstairs, Luffy pulls back, lining himself up with the window so that he can rocket out of it, and he lands just as the shots are fired. The bullets hit him, and then they stretch him and stretch him and stretch him, and then he just releases them completely unharmed, yelling that those things like guns, they don't work on him, and laughing and bragging to Zoro that he told him he was strong. Zoro then asks who he is, and he tells him that he's Monkey D. Luffy, and he'll be the Pirate King. I love that his name is Monkey. I think that's like one of the best things about the show. It's so adorable. Monkey D. Luffy. Obviously, he's having a great time still. I love the whole fact that Helmeppo has like the powdery pink room because it suits his character so well. And obviously, Morgan, dislikable, immediately shooting people to execution, like sentencing people to execution without due process. Not a good idea, not a good look for him. We also get some foreshadowing on Kuno's importance to Zoro. And then we also learn that bullets, at least the round ones, they don't work on Luffy. But it's kind of miraculous, you see, because when he was hit by them, they went right out straight the back of his clothing and there was a tear in his vest. But once he dispels them again, all of those tears in his clothes, they just magically mend themselves. And don't you just love cartoons for that? Well, anime for that too. Which anime are a genre of cartoon. So, I think it's really great. We get to see even more of Luffy's strength. Him bragging to Zoro how strong he was is a nice little aside. And of course, we get more information on the extent of his powers and how strong they do make him by essentially proving that he is bulletproof. And with that, that is the last scene of this episode, and we are left on a bit of a cliffhanger. So now we come to the time in this video where we are going to be ranking this episode against the other episodes within the arc. We have a mostly objective ranking list. Objective because it's void of emotion, only mostly so because bias and judgment do still apply. And then, of course, our personal ranking, which is just all of the emotion and how much we actually enjoyed watching the episode, or at least that I enjoyed watching the episode. So we'll start with our mostly objective rank values, and we'll start with the positive side of things. So in this episode, we get our multi-arc main character introduction in that we are officially introduced to Zoro as a character, which is worth 4 points. Then we have a multi-season support or multi-arc supporting character introduction in Helmeppo, as he does reoccur as well in future arcs, and that is worth 3 points. And so that brings us to a total of 7 points. But there is one minor negative to point out, and that is that this is really a setup episode. Most of what happens in this episode is really setting up for the next one, but not entirely. Like there's new information in this one as well, but there's a bit of a feeling to it that you're just waiting for it to get to where it needs to go. So it's setting up for the actual confrontation, for the resolution, which in theory all arcs will, but because it's such a short arc, it's basically the entire episode, not just like little foreshadowing hints, but like a full setup episode, in my opinion. And that makes it a -1, which brings us to a total score objectively, or mostly objectively, for this episode of 6 out of 10. So with that, our arc rankings so far for this arc are in episode orders, and that is starting with I'm Luffy, the man who will become the Pirate King, and now in second place, the Great Swordsman appears, Pirate Hunter Roronoa Zoro. We then, of course, move on to the personal ranking. Now, the reasons why I chose to rank it the way that I did is that there are a lot of comedic moments in this episode. There are a lot of times when I laughed, when I was smiling almost the whole time. But it mostly is a set of smaller scenes meant to establish the motivations for the characters' fights in the next episode and the backstory, which is leading to that fight in the next episode. So, as I mentioned before, it's a bit of a setup episode. We do get to meet Zoro briefly, but again, we're not seeing any of his skills. He's basically just tied to a pole, and they're talking, and that is the vehicle for a lot of the comedic moments that occur. But ultimately, he's like not doing much at this point either. So for me, it was an average episode. I enjoyed a lot of the comedy side, but I also found that like it was a bit boring. Like you could tell it was setting up, and so even though it was funny, it was still kind of like, okay, but now let's get to the action. Let's get to the meat of this. And so I personally gave it a 5 out of 10 ranking, which leaves my personal ranking list in the same episode order. I'm Luffy, the man who will become the Pirate King, in slot 1, and the Great Swordsman appears, Pirate Hunter Roronoa Zoro, in second place. And so we come now to our saga ranking so far. This is where we are going to be ranking each of the arcs within the saga against each other. So with the Romance Dawn arc, with our new scores, we now have, because there are 3 episodes in the series, a maximum score of 30 can be reached, and we have 16 out of 30 for the mostly objective list, and 12 out of 30 for the personal ranking for the arc so far. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked One Piece, The East Blue Saga, Romance Dawn arc, Episode 2, The Great Swordsman Appears, Pirate Hunter Roronoa Zoro. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.